Hello, welcome back to All for United WFC. Another signing. Look at this transfer window has been quite something, as you will find out, because we're going to get every time we do one of these player profiles, we always get more and more hyped. And the closer the season kind of approaches, I'm putting United higher and higher up the table. So we'll see how that one goes. As you will have seen by now, obviously it's confirmed Celin Bizet is a United player. So I've got Jamie with me to talk through everything we can expect as United fans of this signing. So Jamie, welcome to the channel. It's the first time I believe on this side of the channel. You have been on the women's football one in the last kind of couple of weeks. How are you doing over there?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be on.
No worries at all. I'm going to start with a question I ask everyone on these player profiles. Just your thoughts on the move when you saw it kind of coming out and now it's official. Your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think this honestly is not just because it's come late in the window, but I think it's probably the most thought-provoking signing that we've gotten, especially on the United side. There's much to say, obviously, about Spurs and the decision to move on Celin Bizet, and especially for such a low fee. And there's a little bit to discuss on her side, but for United, I think this is a brilliant signing. This is a 22-year-old winger who's obviously had a lot of WSL experience. She had 19 starts out of 20 games last year, and she brings that directness that I think United have been calling out for. So if I was a Manchester United fan right now, I would be very, very excited about Celin Bizet.
And this is something we were kind of talking about a bit backstage as well. But are you surprised the fee is as low as it is? We're seeing women's football and kind of the transfer fees are going up and up every summer. It's kind of around the kind of 60k, obviously 70k euro, and you know that kind of margin. Is that lower than you would have expected for a player like her?
100%. I think when I first saw the news, without even thinking about what it meant for United, it was first what it meant for Tottenham. And for me personally, I covered Spurs probably the most out of everyone last season, just location based, and also their comms team is really great at getting the media involved. And I always said, a lot of my friends in this industry can probably vouch for that, Celin Bizet is an unbelievable player, but she's also criminally underrated. And I think, especially with Robert Villaham, he's kind of installing this attacking-minded football. And to give away a player like her for such a low fee was very surprising for me. And I'm still kind of trying to juggle around the logic of it, because she's an impressive player and she's proved herself as a mainstay at Spurs. So again, United can't complain, but it is a little disappointing. Like, as you said, women's football, these transfer fees are going up as they should be. And 60k feels like an absolute steal for a player of her, not only her talent right now, but her prospect.
Especially her age as well, obviously only 22, and you know that chance to develop even further in a career and in the national side, and obviously now at United as well from a club point of view. For people who maybe haven't seen it, then where would you kind of say her best position is? Where do you think she would? Obviously, she may have played in a couple of positions, but where would you say her standout position is?
Definitely along that right wing. I think Celin is one of those wingers that if you're playing alongside her at right back, or you're playing alongside her in the midfield position, you love her as a teammate. She is that direct style winger in terms of, not to play stat man or anything, but she's in the top 10% for dribbles, successful dribbles, as well as touches in the opponent's box. So she's direct and she's composed on the ball. And I think United have had a little bit of trouble getting that to gel in their front line. It's an ever-changing front line, it seems. So I think for 22 years old, a right winger like that is unbelievable. But not only that, her defensive actions are probably the best part of her game. And I think that her ability to recover, her ability to stop fullbacks from getting any overlap is something that goes really underrated in her game. And not only does that help United holistically, but it opens up fullbacks, it opens up the 10. I think it allows Jade Riviere, if she's playing on that right back role behind Celin, it allows her to be more attacking, knowing that winger is going to drop back. So I'd say she can play on the left, which is nice. It's a bit of versatility, but as a right winger, she's exceptional. I can't believe she's gone this underrated for so long.
It's interesting you mentioned her defensive attributes. I'm just thinking, as you were saying there, last season, obviously Jace was kind of the right wing. We saw Nikita Paris out there a couple of times. But Jace's tracking back ability, I think, let us down a few times. I think she is the best, on the ball in terms of, that we had in the squad at running at players last season, certainly in terms of beating a player. That was never an issue. Her end product, obviously, is still a bit an area to improve, but that kind of, we saw the gaps, especially in the bigger games, in the Chelseas, the Arsenals, and so on, where that space that she vacated, and you almost had Katie Zelem covering the whole of that side of the pitch, as well as trying to cover the centre. And it brings back to the Emirates, where there was just so much space. So if Celin can bring that as well, in terms of, and in those games in particular, kind of that tracking back, helping Jade out, because so many times last season, Jade was getting doubled up on because there wasn't a right winger that was coming back. help on that side either. That's an interesting thing next. I'm quite intrigued to see how that can play out in coming back and things like that. What would you kind of say? You mentioned a couple of them there, kind of like standout attributes are in terms of where you think you've mentioned the defensive qualities in terms of tracking back and things like that. Going forward, you mentioned a couple of those as well. What would you say are key ones to really watch out for next season?
Definitely defensive work's a big one, obviously. And like you said, United looking for that. But I think her ball carrying ability, not only just by pace, but also technically, is really, really impressive. We've seen glimpses of it for Spurs, and I think it's a bit harder sometimes when games run out and legs get tired. But if I'm a United fan right now and I'm looking at Celin, I'm saying, okay, I've got a ball carrier here that can work hard. She's quick. She'll carry the ball into the opposition box, but she'll also make back post runs because she's fit. She's got a tank on her. So I think I'm just looking at a winger that can carry the ball and can work hard, can play along the entire width. So honestly, defensively and also just with the ball at her feet, she's dangerous.
It's exciting to have those kind of options, and we'll come to Nikita Parris a little bit later on, so I definitely want to talk about her because I think it's interesting when we put the post out on WFC about this that most of the replies were, that's an amazing signing, but what happens to Keith? So I do want to ask you about her a bit later on as well, because I think there's a feeling that this might be a one-in, one-out situation. Obviously, we know her kind of friendship with Grace and everything like that's well documented online in many social media channels and things like that. I want to talk about this separately in just a second, but in terms of on the pitch, what kind of player do you think she will work well with? Who do you think she needs around her to kind of get the best out of her as well?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I definitely think we won't be obvious with Grace, but having that chemistry come in from Spurs as they're both starting players is unbelievably valuable because Grace has a bit of a seamless comeback in, and Celin obviously has someone that she knows very well. I think that, to be honest, I think she'll work really well with Melvin Mallard. I think that she's a 9 that is quite dynamic as well as direct. And I think there was a lot of times with Tottenham that Celin maybe wasn't best utilised because there's options with Spurs where maybe a player like Beth England or Martha Thomas was floating back a bit too deep and she didn't really have a 9 to work with and to play off. And I think that up front partnership could be quite deadly, but also coming back to what you said about Jade Riviere, I think that right side could be so exciting because it's young and they're quick. And I think if they're working as an overlapping fullback role, Celin's kind of dropping back, Jade's going up, I think that will be a very exciting right side.
See, I said this at the start of this. I love doing these because it just gets me more and more hype for the kind of players that we're going to see there as well. Here's a kind of, I guess, a different kind of question. It might be a little bit tough to answer because we don't know at the moment. Do you think she's going to start the season in terms of on that right-hand side? Do you think she comes in straight away and starts? Obviously, Elizabeth Turlin, we're expecting to probably be the starting striker, I think, in pre-season already. I think she's probably on around 5 goals at the moment in pre-season. So she's probably going to be the starting striker. Do you see her coming in and starting straight away on the right, or do you think she's going to have to wait her time to potentially start on that right-hand side?
My first reaction to the news was, I don't know about this for Celin herself, because I think that there's obviously a lot of option at right wing for United right now. Whether that is of the highest quality, that's a different story. I don't doubt that maybe 3 or 4 games in, she will become the starting right winger, but I don't think it will come very close, especially because the deals come a little bit at the later stages of this window. But going forward for Celin, I don't doubt that she'll be the starting right winger. I think she'll implement herself really well, and her attributes really match the players that United have, maybe even better. Spurs fans aren't going to like it, but maybe even better than the Spurs players that she was playing alongside. So I think it won't take her long. And I think she's a young player. She's only 22, but she's already proved herself. So she doesn't really have to show that she's good enough in the WSL. But I don't think she'll be starting straight off the bat. I think Mark Skinner will probably have another go with Jace as the right winger and see if she gets off to a fast start.
Especially when you're talking about, if you're looking at kind of 3-4 weeks in, as you mentioned there, obviously our first few games, West Ham at home, Everton away, then there's a Conti Cup game, whatever game that's going to be, then it's Chelsea away on match day 3. So if we get to that point and she's kind of pushing her way in, then that's the standard game. And then Arsenal on match day 6. So the games are coming thick and fast in terms of the teams that United are going to want to be catching next season. So I'm intrigued. And obviously we've still got Spurs to play in pre-season as well. So that's going to be an interesting reunion. I think that is our last pre-season game before the start of the WSL as well. So that's an interesting one right before the start of the season. We've mentioned obviously Grace and that kind of off the field kind of friendship and connection that we've seen and over over the years as well. Obviously, last year it was well documented and well, obviously, I think the media team did a great job in putting those two together for a lot of different media activities and things like that. Do you think that would help her, the fact that she's going to have that at United already, that kind of person that she knows? Turlin's another person that she knows as well, that some players maybe don't have when they come to a new club. It's finding it a bit easier to settle for her.
Yeah, definitely. I think it makes it easier in any setting, let alone football team. Obviously, knowing someone that you're about to work with, you already have that built relationship. You don't have to start from the ground up and do the personal stuff. And I think that translates on the field. And Grace and Celin, I've said it a lot of times throughout the 2023-24 season, they were probably Tottenham's most consistent performers, and they were playing consistently well together as well. It's not just, the media side, and the media side is very, very helpful. And like you said, I think Spurs really marketed it well, but it definitely makes it easier, especially with Elizabeth Turland at Norway. Obviously, they play together on the international stage, and there's been a lot of chances for them to play together for Norway. So I think she's coming in and she's already knowing these roles of the players that will be playing closest to her as well. So that'll definitely benefit her. And I think it's also, again, from a United fans' perspective, it's gold. It's honestly exciting to watch, especially if Clinton is kind of deployed as that 10 and will be working with her a lot.
No, absolutely. And Lisa Nilsson as well, another Norwegian I forgot we had there as well, because we did have 3 Norwegians a couple of years ago, obviously, with Maria, Vilda, and Lisa. So we're back up to 3 again, which is nice for those of you who like the Norwegian squad as well. I want to talk briefly on Keats in terms of how you think this might impact her potential decision. There was a lot of talk around April time that she turned down an offer to stay at United to play the cup final. Obviously, I'm sure she doesn't regret that, winning the FA Cup back in May. There was reported interest from Tom Gary recently that Newcastle are potentially interested. I'm aware of a couple of other clubs that are interested, but there's not long left of the window now. Do you think a signing like this potentially impacts her decision in any way, that you could see her leaving, or do you think United are better off trying to keep hold of her at least until maybe January to let Celin settle in and obviously Turland as well?
Yeah, first of all, from a United point of view, I think if I was United right now, I'd be holding on to her. She had a really gem of a season last year, and I think that, like you said, implementing a player like Celin, obviously it's not going to come off straight away, so you kind of want to have that more experienced player having a go in that lineup and stuff. And I think Nikita Parris has really proved herself, perhaps when there was a little bit of doubt surrounding her and her ability. She had a standout season for United. She was probably one of the strongest wingers in the league. But I think if I'm Nikita Parris right now, I'm looking at this incoming signing who's not only young and plays in my position, but she isn't an inexperienced footballer, and United aren't buying her to play on the bench. They're not buying her to add depth. She's a great footballer. She played a lot at Spurs. She started nearly every single game bar one. So I think if I'm Paris, I'm maybe looking for an option where I can be a consistent starter, because she's in the latter stages of her career and she wants to be playing football. She doesn't want to be waiting her turn, whereas Celin might be a little bit more nice about it and a little bit more comfortable to wait her turn. But if I'm Paris, I'm maybe looking for a January move.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm edging more towards now. I think she's going to be out of contract next summer anyway. An NWSL move in January potentially is kind of where I'm leaning more towards now. That's the kind of move I can see. But yeah, I don't think she's going to play as much this season as she did last season. But I think if from a United point of view, you're looking to fight on all competitions, the Conti Cup, the League Cup. I keep calling it the Conti Cup. I'm never going to get out of that habit. the League Cup, and obviously the FA Cup as well. You're going to need those players. Turlands and these types of players cannot play every single minute. You're going to need other options as well. So I think it wouldn't be a bad thing. I don't think, to keep her at least until January to see how things develop. Back to Celin. How high do you think her ceiling is? And every time I ask this question, I always throw the caveat in that potential is hard to predict because injuries and playing time and all that kind of thing. So it is a hard one to kind of predict, years in advance. But seeing where she is now and watching over the last kind of couple of years, where do you think her ceiling is? How good do you think she can get to?
Honestly, I think the way I judge potential is I kind of look at the trend in the last 12 months, and it's hard. You can't really make negative assumptions, but if you see a positive trend in 12 months, then I think the ceiling is sky high. For Celin, she obviously signed for Spurs from PSG in the summer of 2022, and then played that one season with Rhiannon Skinner, and Spurs were a struggling side, and she was also struggling, and maybe that wasn't to fault of her own because Tottenham they were closer to that relegation battle than they were to the mid-table battle, but over the last 12 months, and maybe it's a lot of testament to the culture that Robert Villaham is bringing to Spurs and the playing style that he is, but Celin has gone from being a solid player to a player that's picked for every Norwegian squad. And it's not just the Norway squad, and perhaps they've definitely been underperforming for the players that they have, but they have a competitive front line. You're looking at players like Graham Hansen and Turland and Guro Reiten, and these are players she's competing with, and she's scored something like 7 goals in 21 appearances. So for Celin, as a 22-year-old, in 12 months, I think the potential has absolutely skyrocketed. So I would say she's going to be a very, very class player and perhaps one of the best creators in the WSL in not too long.
No, absolutely. I've always said that when the Norwegians, obviously, when we signed Turner as well, they're learning off players. You mentioned Guro Reiten, Oda Hegerberg is another one as well, and Sejovic as well, that they've got in that front line that's well trusted in that Norwegian squad. And that's not even mentioning the midfielders they've got as well that are coming through as well. But the players that she can learn off is the point I'm getting at there as well. They've got some incredibly talented youngsters coming through. They're kind of 17, 18 as well. So they're ones to keep an eye on that are coming out of Norway as well. So I think learning off those kinds of players, and I go back to it, although this isn't the same position, I'm kind of going slightly off topic a little bit, but keeping Rachel Williams, I think, for another season will have a big impact on a player like Celin, like Elizabeth Turner, these younger players, even like Emma Watson and Clinton, these types of players coming in, because she's been there and done it. She's been around what she was pre kind of this boom that we've seen in women's football where, you know, there's now money in the game and that kind of thing. She remembers what it was like before that. And I think having a player there to give you that kind of guidance as well as being a good footballer on the pitch. We saw what Rach did for us last season. I think will be incredibly helpful as well. My last kind of quick question then, and I'm intrigued to see where you put this one. If you could rate the signing out of 10, where would you put it? I always caveat that by saying you can do that from the player's point of view, from the club's point of view, and kind of will find an average out of the two.
Mm-hmm. For a United point of view, I think it's hard to fault. I'm not going to give them a 10 because I feel like that's like signing Aitana Bonmati on a free. So I'm going to say an 8. I think it's excellent business. I honestly think it's excellent business. For Celin, I think she's got a good enough head on her shoulders to not be going to a club without a clear goal there and without a clear role there. So I think for herself, if it works out for her in the long run, then I'd say maybe a 7. Depending on how that backroom is managed this year, hopefully it's a bit of a pickup considering the squad talent that they've developed during the summer window. So, yeah, maybe 7.5 on average. Oh, that feels low though. That feels low.
I was going to say it's about. I'm trying to think back to where the other signings were. I think Turlin was ridiculously high because that was just me. I bumped that up. But who else did we sign? Janssen, I think, was an 8. Miriam gave an 8. Who else have we signed this window? I forget that we've signed so many players. Simia Wood, I think, got an 8 as well. Sandberg was an 8. So an 8 is about average, I think, for United signings, which is a good thing because a lot of our signings last season, I don't think people would have given that high of a score to. So yeah, I think I'm excited. It's hard to judge, isn't it? Because you don't know how much she's going to play. Is she going to settle well at United? I think she will, but you don't know fully how this is going to play out. My final quick word, actually, I just wanted to ask you, this is slightly different to, well, it's not different, but it's off topic from Celin a little bit in terms of, because we had a bit of back and forth when we were talking about this on Twitter, and because you mentioned about United's window as a whole, and obviously we're drawing towards the end of the window now with a couple of weeks left at the time of recording this. How would you kind of summarise United's window? Because at the start of the window, it was reported that this could be quite a rough summer for United. Everyone was saying that deals are going to be left late. United are going to struggle to get anyone. There's going to be a lot of players leaving. And we've actually, in my opinion, had probably our best ever window since the team was reformed in 2018. Is that kind of where you're leaning towards, looking at it from the outside?
Definitely. At the start of this summer, I think there was obviously the outgoings of some big high-profile players. It also felt like there was a little bit of backroom disagreement with maybe some players not getting the farewells that they deserved. And there was obviously a lot of media attention around United, and it seemed like they'd lost players and there wasn't really a pull to get big names. And then it just came in a constant flow of talent. And obviously you've got someone like Dominic Janssen who's experienced, but then it's youth talent coming through that are already playing their trade at a top level. You look at Elizabeth Turland, last year, one of the best strikers in the WSL. Again, Celin. They've signed young talent that's coming through. So I think United fans, it's a very unexpected but welcomed celebration, because I didn't think it would go as well as it did. And I agree with you. It's probably United's best window since joining the WSL. I think it's ended up very well compared to where it started in that narrative.
Well, I'm glad you agree on that, because I think when you're looking at everything else, as you mentioned, big names left at the start of the window, particularly Mary and Zell. Obviously, you lose your captain, you lose your starting keeper that's played every single WSL minute. It's going to be a big story. But only 5 departures from the first team over the course of the summer, when I think it was about 19 last summer, so it was quite a lot last season. And the ins, I think, have been clever ins as well. And I think Mark's going to spoke about this after the Newcastle game pre-season over the weekend, that they've gone for a slightly younger approach in this window as well with those kinds of players. So, yeah, I think it's solid. Obviously, we don't know how this is going to translate onto the pitch yet. I hope, from our point of view, that it does, but only time will tell on that one. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me to talk all about Celin, obviously signing for Manchester United. If people want to find more of your work, things like that, I know you're incredibly busy yourself with various different projects and things like that going on. Where can people find all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me across all social medias at Jamie Spanger, and then you can find a lot of my work on the Halfway Line.
Absolutely. Make sure you go and check all that out. I'll leave all that in the description to this video. Make sure you're liking this video, subscribing, follow all of our socials at All for United WFC on everything, so it's easy to find. We shall see you guys in the next one.